truth and reconciliation to get past that conflict and move on to the next part of your life or to the next stage of what needs to take place. And sometimes that's extremely difficult to do. And truth, by definition alone, is the state of being true. That which is true or in accordance to its fact, its reality. It's the belief or acceptance of something that is actually true. And reconciliation, by definition alone, is to restore, this is my favorite portion of it, is to restore friendly relationships between. I still feel like this is a little bit loud, so I'm going to flex it out a little bit. Is to restore the relationships between two people, two countries, two businesses, whatever that might be. It's the cause to coexist in harmony or make or show to be compatible. Why choose such a topic, truth and reconciliation? Far too often, you as an individual might be stuck in the middle of something, whether it's your own problem or whether it's the problem of somebody else's. And sometimes, when you're stuck in the middle of that, you might only get half of a story. You might only get half of the information. And you choose to believe sometimes the portion of the story or the portion of something that you received as opposed to hearing the full story. And by only getting half of the information, you have a jaded opinion on something, and it can cause conflict, it can cause issues, it can cause division, because you haven't given the full, fair story or hearing of what needs to take place. And so I'd like to start off reading in John chapter 8, and I'm going to read about 12 verses here. It says, Jesus went up into the Mount of Olives, and I'm going to read 1 through 12. And early in the morning he came again into the temple. And all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and Pharisees brought unto him a woman taken into adultery. A woman taken into adultery. That's a pretty big accusation taking place right here. And when they had set her in the midst, they say unto him, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now it's no longer just an accusation. We caught it in the act. This was taking place. So now we have a little bit of fact of something that just occurred. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote in the ground as though he heard them not. And I want to just, before I read the rest of these verses, they brought this up before Jesus, giving him one half of a story right here, in hopes to find some fault with his decision. They want Jesus to make a decision, and they bring half of a party to him, and they're like, it does not matter. We have caught, this is a flawless plan. We have caught an idea, and we're going to present it to him, and he has to make a decision. Are we going to stone this individual or not? Do the Mosaic law, this decision alone, stoning was good enough for death. He cannot make the right decision here no matter what. Either he's going to choose to go against the law, or he's going to say go the law, and we're going to find flaw with the decision that he's making. We're going to have some of these people that believe in him to turn against him, and now he's got to make a decision, and no matter what he chooses is going to be wrong. Somebody's going to have an issue with it, and we can accuse him and find fault in Jesus' teachings here. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger wrote on the ground as though he heard them not. And when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him cast the first stone. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are those thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Then spake Jesus unto them, saying, I am the light of the world. He that followeth me shall not walk in darkness, but shall have a light of life. Now, what what do you find wrong with this accusation taking place? They just brought a woman caught in the act of adultery, and they bring her before Jesus, knowing that he's going to have to make a decision. I feel like this is it loud or is it okay? Feeling that he has to make a decision and that they are going to find fault with the decision that he makes. And instead of hearing them, and he tunes them out to assent, goes back down and writes on the ground and says, whoever of you has no sin, go ahead and pick up that stone. Find a stone and you be the first one to accuse them. You accuse them because you're perfect. Go ahead. If you're without sin, pick up that stone and accuse them. But before I go a little bit further, think about it. We just brought a woman caught in the very act. What's the problem with that? We're missing the other half of this act. We only brought one person forward. We're accusing one person. We're only getting one half of the story. We're only getting one side of this situation. So they bring her before God, and God, knowing that there's two sides to this story. There's two people involved in this issue. There's two people in this sin or this act that's taking place, but we're only getting half of it right now, so now I have to handle it accordingly. And so as we look into it, even though they could execute this woman for this very sin due to the Mosaic law there, Jesus instead chooses forgiveness. By the law in itself, she was in the act. By the very law in itself, everybody grab a stone and start throwing it. Stone her. This is good enough for death. The major concept of the human ethics in this portion of the story is just because you as an individual, you might have the power to do something, you might have the power to make a pretty big decision, but that doesn't always mean that it's going to be the best option. You know, an option means there's more than one decision that you can make here. A lot of times you're dealt some cards here in life, and you can choose between two different ones. You don't have to go this direction or choose this option every time. We know what the option was. The option and the outcome was to choose death. But because there was more to the story, he opted not to hear them, acted as if he didn't, and then threw another option out there to where they couldn't find fault with his decision. Are you perfect? You pick up the stone. You point the finger. You say she's doing wrong. You cast the first stone. Those that have the right to pass judgment, those are the ones that are faultless. But who among us are faultless except one? There's not one among us that can pass that judgment. You might be able to bring something to light because you have an obligation to do something. You might be able to bring something to one's attention because it's what you're supposed to do. But it doesn't mean you get to point the finger and do the judging. Those that cast the stone and choose to do that judging, those are the ones that are quick to blame. They're the ones that are quick to criticize. And they're the first ones to point that little bony finger and say, this is their fault. They're doing this. They're the ones that are wrong. And we find it easy to do that, and I'm going to speak a little bit further on some, because sometimes we don't want the light on us. Right now, the attention's over here, so let's get some people over here and point this way, because I'm probably got something wrong going on in my life, but right now we can shed the light over here and have everybody focus on that, and maybe my problem will just kind of get swept underneath the rug. It's pretty easy to have happen. And so, you know, I bring that decision. I'm going to give you a couple examples of why it is paramount to hear both decisions. I use that word just for Stephen and Sarah because they like when I use that word, paramount. Why it's important that you hear both sides of the decision. You know, for my career, what I do full time, I'm a law enforcement officer. And I'm going to give you two ideas of why you need to hear two sides of a story. Something as simple as a crash. I get dispatched, I respond to a two-vehicle crash in the middle of a pretty busy intersection and somebody's T-boned. I can only hear one side of the story at a time. I collect both parties' information, and the first person's story that I hear is they ran their red light and they T-boned me. Now I'm like, all right, let me go back, run your information. I look at the driving history, and the driving history says this person has a pretty squeaky clean history. No wrecks, no tickets, no crashes, no summonses of any sort. Why should they be at fault? They have a pretty perfect history. Why should I disbelieve or discredit what they just told me? So I'm going to go ahead, because I've got this half of the story, I'm going to make a decision and summon somebody based off of only half the information I've received. But before I do that, I go up to the next person, or before I go up to that other person, I go ahead and run the other subject's information, and I see, man, he's got multiple crashes, he's been summoned for reckless driving, he's got multiple speeding tickets. This person has to be telling me the truth, so that they can't be wrong. This other person has such a history, such a poor driving record, they got to be at fault. So I go over there and hear their side of the story, and I explain to them, based off of the information I just received, I'm going to have to issue a summons because you T-boned them, and I don't even give them a fair shot and hear their side of the story. And he looks at you and he says, but sir, I didn't do it. It's not my fault. Well, what happened? We had a green light. I was just the one in the very front, and as I was pulling through, they're trying to excel through their light, and I end up T-boned them. Yes, I T-boned them, but I had a green light. All right, well, yeah, you T-boned them. You're at fault. Your driving history tells me you're probably the one that's going to be the one that's at fault for this accident. But you look around and you have a witness and says, yeah, we had a green light. I was following them behind them, and they had a green light, and the other person ran their red light and ended up T-boning them. And so the person says, yeah, my history indicates that I'm probably at fault. I've got a poor driving record, officer. Yes, I've been in the wrong many times. I've been issued many citations. I've been in the wrong, but I assure you, because of my past doesn't mean that's who I am right now. That doesn't mean I'm going to be at fault right now. Because of what you see in my history, please don't make that your accusation of who I am now. Please don't automatically assume I'm the one at fault. And so, because of two sides of a story and hearing the full context of what took place, now you make a different decision and you summons the right person who's actually at fault. So you have two sides of a story that you hear there, and the other one's a little bit more, something you guys may hear more frequently is what's called a domestic between two parties. And I'm using both context and giving you an example for a reason to make this point here. If I respond to a domestic and the primary caller is a female, and the female calls on the line and says, my husband pushed me and I've got a bloody nose, and you get there and sure enough, and you talk to the female and you start collecting a little bit of information, the male subject walks up and says, I know how this goes. You always believe the woman's side of the story. Go ahead and take me in cuffs and put me, I'm ready to go. Let's just go. Put me in cuffs. I'm at fault. I did it, whatever. Put me in cuffs. I can't tell you how many times that has come up because the female made the phone call. It's automatically assumed that I'm supposed to take the male, and the male gets a little bit defensive. And they believe that you're automatically going to take them because you hear one side of the story. Sir, just because she called me doesn't mean you're at fault. Let me hear her side of the story first. You hear her side of the story, and you only get half. Unfortunately, when I show up to these, I only get half until I talk to both of them. And she says, he pushed me. There's two things that determine whether you make an arrest, and it's a predominant aggressor or apparent injury. And she's, based off of her story, she's got a bloody nose. She's been shoved into the wall. And so I can tell there's injury, and now there's an aggression that took place. And so by going over there and just talking to him, he says, well, I know you just heard her side of the story. Go ahead and just take me in the cuffs. Well, sir, I don't want to do that. Well, I've already been arrested numerous times for it, and she's never been arrested, so I know I'm going to be the one you're taking. Well, can you tell me your half of the story? No, it's all right. I did it. No, let me hear your side of the story. And just before he tells you your side of the story, I want to make this point. Sometimes the male or whoever, they automatically assume the blame, not because they know you're going to take them, it's because they feel that obligation as the man or whoever that I'm going to cover for them. I'll do whatever. I'm going to take the punishment. It's my fault, take me. And so you go ahead and make a decision based off of a lack of correspondence from the other party. But you hear out the story, and he says, yes, I did push her. I did hit her face and pushed her into the wall. But the reason I did that is because she was a little intoxicated. We were arguing about bills and money and something else, and she just went over the edge, and she came running at me with a kitchen knife out of frustration, and I went up and she caught my arm, with the knife and I pushed her back at a reflex and I pushed her into the wall, so it did take place. Well, now you've got the full story. You have somebody that wants to cover for them, but yet the person that called me is actually the one at fault here. The person that's actually the one, I don't want to say crying wolf, but the person that's trying to manipulate the story a little bit, because every time they've called, every time they've brought it to your attention, they've been sided with based on the tears, based on the manipulation, based on the information that was provided to you. That side of the story has been the one that's been taken. Sometimes you got to dig in a little bit deeper to understand what took place before you make a decision. And so hopefully that makes sense as I'm moving forward with this. Is you can't just take half of a story before you point the finger and you point blame at something. In Luke chapter 6, verse 37 through 42. And I know a lot of people are familiar with this. Judge not, and ye should not be judged. Condemn not, and ye should not be condemned. Forgive, and ye shall be forgiven, and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down and shaken together, and running over, shall men give unto your bosom. For the same measure that ye meet withal, it shall be measured to you. And he spake a parable unto them. Can the blind lead the blind? Shall they not both fall into the ditch? The disciple is not above his master, but everyone that is perfect shall be as his master. And this is the portion that I want to get to. And why beholdest thou the mote? Why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but perceivest not the beam that is in thine own eye? Either how canst thou say to thy brother, Brother, let me pull out the mote that is in thy eye, even when thou thyself beholdest not the beam in thine own eye? Thou hypocrite, cast out first the beam out of thine own eye, and then shalt thou see clearly to pull out the mote that is in thy brother's eye. You know, I was talking about it just briefly, and it's very easy to point that finger because the light is over here right now. The problem, what you consider to be a big problem, somebody else might find to be a pretty minor deal. What you consider to be minor, somebody else might consider to be a rather large issue. And so you have a perception of what is right and what is wrong, what is more extreme, what is not more extreme, and you start to weigh the balance in your own mind, and you start to do the judging yourself of, well, this isn't so bad, but that right there, that's pretty rough. So my problems aren't that, but we'll point out the issues over here. We'll say this is a little bit more extreme because this is taking place. I can't be a part of that. We got to fix this problem. So while you're sitting there trying to scratch the little mote that's in your brother's eye, you're walking around with this beam that's just like hanging from your eye. It's pulling your head down because you got your own flaws and problems that large that you're dealing with, but because the light is right here right now, nobody sees what you're dealing with. It's not being surfaced because right now this is the center of attention. And so it's very easy for us to point the finger and say, hey, you see this problem over here? Let's focus on that. Let's go try to deal with that. And so you start to draw a little bit of a crowd, and that crowd kind of starts to form against the individual with the problem. And so not only do you have your own problems, you're creating problems amongst yourselves that can easily be dealt with if you just deal with your issues first. You know, as I'm moving forward here, in Psalm 66, 18 through 20, it's difficult sometimes because we think the answer is just, I've got a problem, I'll pray with it, I'll pray about it, and God will take care of it. And so that's where this verse comes in. If I regard iniquity in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. And before I read the next verse, iniquity, immoral or grossly unfair behavior. A pretty nasty thing. And if I regard the iniquity, what does that mean? If I regard the iniquity in my own heart, if I allow myself to continue to indulge in this problem, if I continue to think the problem I am facing is okay, and I'll just pray about it tomorrow because God will forgive me, but yet as soon as I pray about it, I'm going to go do it again because I just know it's okay. God will take care of the problem if I pray for it. Well, no, right here, I don't think that's the issue. I don't think that's what it's saying here. It says, if I regard the iniquity, if I continue to indulge in my own sins here, If I continue to allow it to take place in my heart, the Lord will not hear me. But verily God hath heard me. He hath attended to the voice of my prayer. Blessed be God, which hath not turned away my prayer, nor his mercy from me. In order for God to hear your prayer, there must be a purpose to forsake the sin that you're dealing with. The problem that is coming to surface, there must be a purpose for you to want to get rid of it. But if you continue to indulge in that sin that you're dealing with, you can be assured that God is not intending to hear the prayer if you intend to continue to focus and live in that sin or that lifestyle, hoping that it's just going to be okay, because I can easily fool my friends, my family, the pastor, my wife, whoever. As long as they don't know what I'm dealing with, I'm good. I can hide it enough and I can say everything's good, but it's really not if you intend on God to take care of those issues, if you find it purposeful to still live in that sin. And so it brings me to the very first part of what I talked about, and I'm bringing these two things together, truth and reconciliation. Truth. Getting to the truth. In John chapter 8, verse 32, if the truth shall set you free, right? It says, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. How many people have heard that many, many times? The truth shall set you free. How hard is it to tell the truth sometimes, depending on the situation? Many of us have been in a situation to where just a little bit of manipulation in the conversation. I didn't exactly lie, but I only told this portion of it so we could move on from the problem. You know, the truth sometimes is hard to swallow, so we'll make up stories, we'll make up events, we'll make up whatever we can to keep sweeping the actual problem underneath the rug. And far too many times, every time we sweep it underneath the rug and we make an excuse or we tell somebody a story, we got to remember what we told that person. So then we tell another person and we might have changed the story up just a little bit. Then we tell another person something, then we might have changed the story up just a little bit more. And so it gets difficult to memorize all these lies to where you almost need a thing of index cards here so you can remember what you've told everybody and you can keep up with your side of the story, what's being told. And this little lie is getting swept further and further and further and further underneath the rug to where you're going to be blindsided, because all these people are going to start talking together and figure out everything you just said was a lie. Proverbs 12:22 kind of rolls right into this. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. Abomination, to cause disgust or hatred. You know, to sit there and lie and to manipulate, it says God hates that. He is disgusted with that lifestyle, with that mentality of, I can trick you and I can trick you and make you think everything's okay, but I can just continue to manipulate it just a little bit so you think I'm actually righteous and all right. And I've got this giant beam hanging in my own eye, but I can sit here and scratch out everybody else's little problems. It tells us that God, how many of you guys have seen The Grinch? Right? The part I see in there, he's going through the little mailroom and he's like, hate, 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 hate. And then he says, loathe. Hey, I don't know if you know what loathe means right there. Loathe is just like the ultimate hate, disgust, like I cannot stand. And that's what God is saying right here. I loathe lying lips. Why would we want to partake in something that God utterly disgusts? But yet it's easy to hide it amongst ourselves and amongst others, and we're okay with making God hate, loathe the actions that we're partaking in. John 3 verse 18. I had a lot of references, so I'm just kind of tying them all together here. It says, my little children, let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth. What does that mean? Let us not love in word, neither in tongue, but in deed and in truth. How easy is it just to love with word and tongue. By that means my mouth and my tongue. I can say something, I love you. It's pretty easy to believe those phrases just because it rolls right off of the tongue. It rolls right out of the mouth. It's pretty easy just to say those words, but it says, where did I put my word? But in deed and in truth. You don't want to love in just the word and tongue, but in deed and in truth. What does that mean, in deed and in truth? It's comparatively easy to love in word and tongue. It is reasonably simple to say, like I said, I love you. But the test of genuine love is expressed in deed and in truth. It is dying to our own self-interest and letting the beauty of the love of the Lord Jesus be seen in us, so that it flows out to others in our actions and in our attitudes. And why I say it like that is because when someone messes up, love in deed and in truth. Love like Christ would love. Because someone messed up or made a decision, sometimes we find it difficult to continue to love and show that grace and mercy that's shown to us by Him. Sometimes it's easy to sit there and point that finger at a flaw that somebody else did or an action that took place. And we find it easy to just use our words and say, I love you, it's okay, whatever the case may be, but you truly aren't okay with the action that took place. It's just words rolling off our tongue and in our mouth. But you need to love like Christ, because just like the person that messed up, you will find yourself, or you have found yourself, probably in a similar situation where you messed up gravely. And if you're the type of person that likes to scratch and point and pull out everybody else's flaws, it's going to be a lonely, dark road when you're the one that has that mess up. When you're the one that struggles and falls short, when everybody else is sitting there like, all right, the light's over here now, let's all start going this way. My problems are now kind of under the radar. I'm now in the shadow, but we can all point the finger right here. We can all draw the attention. We can point the flock this direction because everybody else is in the clear right now while the main focus is here. It's very easy to find yourself in the group that is doing the pointing because nobody likes to be the person being pointed at. I'm kind of getting to the end here. It's and this is the part that I wanted to focus on the most, the reconciliation part. The truth, drawing up that truth and coming from the part that we know was wrong and what took place. That's hard to fathom or get to on your own. That's hard to come up with the truth. But I want to read a couple verses out of Matthew. Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 through 17. Moreover, in thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee one or two more, that the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, every word, may be established. You know, if you have an issue, it says brother. It doesn't necessarily mean your immediate brother. If you have an issue with one individual, one person, go to them and address the problem. And if they are able to reconcile and fix that issue, then great. Move on from it. But if we're not able to and they don't want to hear what you have to say, then it says, hey, bring yourself a witness. Bring 1, bring 2, bring what you need to do to show that you are trying to make the proper amends. You are trying to do the right thing to get this issue resolved properly without necessarily scratching at their eye because of their flaw, but you're trying to handle it properly. We're not trying to play judge here. We're trying to remedy the problems that are here, but do it in a way that's not drawing all the attention to one person. It says try to handle it yourself first. You don't need to make everybody aware of this problem. Nobody needs to know all the flaws of this person and what's going on in her life and why it's taking place. Not everybody you're just going to start a big old rumor. You're going to be rumors galore going on here, and everybody's stories are going to get all construed, and they're not going to be accurate, and then this person's just going to look terrible from all the things that are being said about them or whatever's taking place because it wasn't handled properly. So try to handle it in a one-on-one basis. And if it's not handled properly, then you bring yourself 1 or 2 witnesses to take care of the problem properly. And from there, you handle it how it's supposed to be. And if it's not being handled how it should be, then you go on making the decisions or making the moves that need to be made. But you don't try to shine the light on the problem for everybody to be a part of and be exposed to where everybody's pointing their finger at this person because of the issue. This brings us down to the next verse here, or backwards, I should say. In Matthew chapter 5, verses 23 through 24. Therefore, if thou bring thy gift to the altar, and there rememberest that thy brother hath aught against thee, leave there thy gift before the altar, and go thy way. First be, the main topic here, reconciled to thy brother, and then come and offer thy gift. Be reconciled to the brother. God, you have your own problems. This is what this altar's for. That's between you and Jesus. But God even says before then, before you even bring your problems here, if you have something you haven't settled with your brother, if you have something you haven't settled with another individual, get that taken care of. Fix that problem. And once you've fixed that problem, or at least attempted to, which we did back up here in the first one in Matthew chapter 18, where you went before them and you're trying to fix that problem like you're supposed to, after you've done your due diligence, after you've done what you're supposed to as an individual, then bring your problems to the altar. Bring it to me, and I reconcile with me what's going on in your heart. Reconcile it here. And then, hopefully, you've got your other things, your issues reconciled with your brothers, your friends, whoever else the problems have been ongoing with. You don't want to bring everybody else's problems to light, because it can surely turn back around on you where you're the one that's under the microscope. You have your own sin that you have to deal with. But take care of it all at the altar. And before you do that, reconcile your problems with those that you may have an issue with. If you cannot reconcile with their brother, why should God reconcile with you? Why should he do that? If you're not willing to fix your problems with the person you have fault or issues with, why should you put that back on God to reconcile with you if you can't do your part first? Fix your own issues. Get the beam out of your eyeball, and then reconcile with everybody else. In order to move on, even though it may not be comfortable engage in the truth, in order to reconcile what may be damaged, you have to deal with what's in your heart, what's with your issues. And then you can start presenting the other things the proper way. And so I know it was rather quick, but I just wanted to get that out there, because as individuals, I believe we find it far too easy to get half of a story, to get partial information. And when you only get a little bit, and sometimes that information is rather easy to believe, and the information may mainly be true, and most of it might be true, but sometimes it's not all true, and you have to dig a little bit deeper to understand the full context of a story, to give a fair fight, to give a fair understanding for somebody else before everybody's got the light shined on them and they're just under a microscope and everybody's gouging at them to where they can't get back up or they don't want to get back up. So I know it was ended rather early. If Pastor, you want to come up, that's what I had this evening for you.
While he was sharing, two verses came to my mind. Actually, most of the verses he's read we've all heard before, right? Many times. There's this idea in Proverbs 28:13. It says, "Whoever conceals their sins doesn't prosper, but the one who confesses and renounces them finds mercy." It's not so much a matter how good I can hide my flaws. I could probably get pretty good at looking good to everybody else. It's better that your conscience be clear, even if other people are looking at you bad, but you can stand before God with a pure conscience because you have confessed and forsaken. Now, one other verse. It says in Proverbs 18:17. Y'all going to have to forgive me. Proverbs 18:17.
According to Bible.com, he that pleadeth his cause first seemeth just, but his neighbor cometh and searcheth him out.
The first one to plead their cause at the accident, they seem just. Remember that when you pull up and the two cars T-boned? The first one to tell you the story, that just seems like they got their stuff together. But their neighbor comes and searches them out. Hold on a minute. What about the 5 cars behind them and the 5 cars behind them? Let's get some witnesses here. And ultimately, your ears hurting? Am I too loud? Oh, okay. Oh, is it cold in here? Uh-oh, everybody get away from her. She's sick. I'm just joking. Those little ports are aiming right at you. So listen how it says this in the Message Bible. The first speech in a court case is always convincing until the cross-examination starts. Isn't that good? That's the Message. Anyway, I thought he did really good. And I'm just telling you, when he said it's easy enough to sweep a little something under the rug. Anybody ever done that? Come on. I sweep a little stuff under the rug every now and then, a little something else. As I turn around, I got this big mound of stuff under my rug, and I can't hide it no more. Sooner or later, I'm going to have to clean out front of the rug. Let's all go ahead and stand to our feet. Hallelujah. Our kids are in there practicing, so we're not going to rush them, but you are going to be dismissed. Father, we love you, and thank you so much for your word, and we just ask, Lord, help us not to be the kind of people that stand in judgment when we ourselves are in such desperate need of mercy. But Lord, teach us to walk in your wisdom and to seek the truth in everything we do. We love you and thank you for your favor in our lives. In the name of Jesus, amen, amen. God bless you. Have a good evening.